На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. This week is a bit of a more eclectic episode, with not just RPL action as usual at the weekend, but midweek we also saw the Cup of Russia semi-finals, and throughout the week the world's been gripped by the Super League controversy that's engulfed European football. To cover all that and more, I'm James Nichols, and I'm always joined by Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. How are we all?
I'm good. I mean, as I mentioned at the back end of last week, we've also got the long-awaited return of, I think you were last on before the winter break, but Match TV's Misha Polenov. Misha, how have you been since you were last on the pod?
Hi, thank you, very good. Thanks for having me again.
We had another high scoring of RPL action on Saturday and Sunday. And in just 8 games, there was 27 goals scored. Now, some of the big results were as follows. Lokomotiv defeated Rostov 4-1. Dynamo travelled all the way down to Volgograd to defeat Rotor 3-0. Krasnodar finally didn't lose for the first time in what feels like an age, as they held leader Zenit to a 2-2 draw. While Rubin Kazan defeated Ural 1-0 away from home to leapfrog CSKA into 4th place. As the aforementioned CSKA lost 2-1 away to Sochi. And then, rounding off the week, Spartak Moscow on the day of the club's 99th anniversary and their own birthday, they lost 3-0 to Ufa. Now, in lieu of some of the because due to the big events that took place at the weekend, we'll just quickly cover some of the big games in the order that they took place at the weekend. So starting with Lokomotiv, I consulted personally the resident RFN Loko expert Ilya Sokolov about how they played at the weekend. And as you would expect, he gave a glowing report. He didn't believe that Loko necessarily played as well as in recent games, but really built upon and counteracted upon Rostov's mistakes, especially that early one from Sergei Pesyakov, which is terrible, terrible touch. Now, Misha, did you catch the Lokomotiv Rostov game, and how was it for you?
From two perspectives. The first one is the Lokomotiv's run by itself, because the cup games included, they now have the 10 games in this year, and official games, and they won all of them. So they are on an absolutely terrific run. I think that this is what Marko Nikolic has done during the winter break. He finally had some time. He had all the players available, and so this is the result of his work. Many football fans expected Lokomotiv to be playing like that in summer, but he didn't have enough time to prepare his team. Now he had, and here is the result. And the second perspective is Rostov, which is I don't know. It seems like they are on a kind of a crash right now, because they have everything ruined right now. This is pretty common for Valery Karpin as a coach, actually, because if we follow his career, we will find that in the spring part of the championship is not his best part. His teams always have some problems from moderate to serious in spring. And this is an example of serious problems, I think. And the mistakes are just the peak of an iceberg.
Yeah, certainly. I remember going back to when Karpin was at Spartak, and last year in particular, Rostov again are just really falling downhill in this second half of the season. But one thing with Loko, like you mentioned that this is Niko Nikolic's work, and I've been so impressed by it. If you look at with a little bit of context, in the winter training camp, they had injuries to Anton Miranchuk, Smolov, Zilovic, Ignatiev, Zhvogliadov, Barinov, and three of them are now recovered from injury, thankfully. But because of that, he was forced to really change the team, bringing in Kamano, Lisakovic, Mukin, Kulikov into a much more of a first team regular role. The roster really had to change because of that, and he did change the tactics as well. And I don't think anybody honestly expected until watching their preseason games in the winter break that he would have changed it to a diamond formation in midfield with Kamano up top alongside Smolov or Eder or Lisakovic, whoever his partner is. Kamano has been the one concurrent in the lineup. He's been the leader at the top, and he's been absolutely excellent in this new role, especially considering his output in the first half of the season. Now, after the game at the weekend, Nikolic mentioned that he was not happy with the quality of the game, but was very much happy with the result. And that's something that's really a microcosm of Lokomotiv this season. A month ago, they were only 13th in the RPL in terms of the overall number of touches in the penalty area, and the worst out of the entirety of the top 6 for both shots in general and shots from inside the penalty area. Now, that's made up for in the individual quality of the players and the smart counter-attacking play. That incisive counter-attacking play that Loko have showed in the second half of the season is just an absolute joy to watch, and it's really effective. Richard, what did you think of the game at the weekend? Was there any players in particular who stood out for you?
I think it was quite a good team performance. I'm going to use, James, quite a good team performance, quite the usual suspects like some of the ones you've just mentioned there. I think having Barinov back in the midfield has been a real plus for Lokomotiv in recent weeks. The back two looked very, very solid. Pablo has come in and again, very, very good, I thought. And like you say, Kamano has just been a player transformed. This is the Kamano that 2.5 years ago was being linked with the likes of Liverpool and Tottenham. He's just a player transformed. I really like this new role that he's found Smolov in the side, in this deeper role, which he plays now in support to Kamano. Zhemeletdinov has been a real discovery for them. I'd almost forgotten about him until this new formation was trialled. Like I say, just a very good, efficient performance from Lokomotiv. Very, very solid. They're just getting the job done. I didn't see the cup match midweek, but it looked like another comprehensive win. Looks like they were considerably better than CSKA, and they look set for. They must be red hot favourites in the cup final. We'll get onto that in a bit later, but they really do look like they're in superb form at the moment. And Nikolic really is proving his worth as manager, and it's fantastic to see him throw in and show faith in these young players like Mukin, Kulikov, find a new role for Ibchinsky at right fullback. But in terms of impressing, I have to say the attacking players. I think Kamano in particular, Smolov has been really good. Barinov's return has been a real positive for them. And you can tell. I think he's starting. I think Nikolic now probably arguably is the best manager in the league. I think he's been generally excellent for them. And I just want to also on the game. I'll second Misha's thoughts as well on Rostov. This is a big summer coming up for them, because this is probably the second year in a row where under Karpin they've fallen away in the spring, and I think it's going to be quite an interesting summer because a number of their players are getting a little bit older now. Obviously, Koslov is quite old at right back, Alexei Koslov. They've also no longer got Yeremenko. Pavel Mamayev is getting quite old, so you'd think they're going to probably need a few players in there. Ali So, apart from that game against Zenit, he's not really done it. I saw they were linked with a striker or two in the newspaper gossip this week, so that could be quite interesting. So it's a big summer coming up for Rostov, and it's disappointing once again how they've collapsed. But good win for Lokomotiv, and it'd be interesting. The barometer is Zenit game in 2 weeks, and it's going to be really interesting. That could be a chance to really lay down a mark for next season. In terms of could they challenge Zenit next season?
One strange part of what's emanated from after the Loko game is that Vilkov, the referee, has actually been dismissed from the RPL. Now, I don't think he was too bad in that game. Armin Gigovic's 2 yellow cards were deserved. Krakowiak did dive for the penalty, and it was soft, but you've seen them given. It's by no means the worst VAR mistake of the weekend, and was quite a few of them across the games. To quickly finish on one in a separate game, Akhmat Kimki. The first goal really should not have stood, and Nenekov should have been shown a red card. Even Ilian fouled too in the build-up to that goal. And it was quite bizarre because he did give Nenekov a yellow card, but didn't scratch the goal off despite the foul. And there's been massive controversy on the game afterwards. And of course, it was Vasily Kazartsev who was right in the centre of that Spartak Sochi debacle at the start of the season. So it's unfortunately another weekend without VAR mistakes. And we will get into a game later on regarding that. But just before Richard, Dynamo also enjoyed an anniversary of the club. It was their 98th anniversary on the day of their 3-0 win against Rotor. Now, how did they play? I guess it was a certain Arsene Zakarian back in the centre of things again for them, Richard.
Yes, it certainly was, James. He once again. It's staggering how he only came into the team right at the back end of before the winter break. 2-3 games before the winter break, he debuted from the bench there, and then since that Akhmat game, first game back after the break, he's just been getting better and better and more influential with Dynamo with every game. In that Akhmat game, he showed such composure and maturity for a 17-year-old kid, who's only just broke into senior football. He's played for Russia under 21s at the European Championships. And again, he's just maturing all the time. He got an assist. I think he put in the ball from the corner for Ivan Ordets's header for the second Dynamo goal. And he's just been at the head once again of this Dynamo attack, and he had to play a slightly different role as well this game, because obviously Sebastian Szymanski got sent off against Ural. He was suspended, so Zakarian basically took his role on the side for that game. He'd been playing further up when Szymanski was in the side, but even in this slightly deeper role, he still did an absolutely brilliant job. And yeah, again, another good comfortable win for Dynamo. As we've said on previous pods, Rotor, they really look like they're going to be relegated, alongside Tambov. They didn't offer that much of a threat going forward again, like against CSKA. But credit Dynamo, second half they upped the tempo of the game and got the win, another good win. They've got Himki at home this week. And again, it's just about winning the game and trying to maintain the pressure on the race for Europe. Conference League qualification is still a possibility for them. It's going to be tough. You get the impression that they're probably going to have to win 3 games out of the remaining 4 to pretty much guarantee Europe. Could get in with 2 wins and a draw, but they're going to have to carry on winning it. But I mean, the Tide's playing well at the moment. There's a decent amount of confidence around. It was a better performance than against Ural, and defence was solid again. So, it's going to be an interesting race. But yeah, it's just wonderful what Sandro Schwartz has done with Arsene Zakarian, putting him into the team, and how Zakarian has blossomed into this terrific young talent is fantastic. And you do get the impression, as we've been saying, how with his performances at Russia under 21s at the recent Euros, whether he'll be catching some glances about this time next season from maybe from abroad, who knows? But fantastic to see Schwartz's faith in Zakarian being rewarded.
Yeah, certainly. It was he was the one big miss in that cup loss to Krylia. Zakarian didn't play a single minute. As a quick side note, as the last word on Dynamo, Daniil Fomin scored a penalty after Sergei Pashivlyuk was fouled in the box. And that's actually 15 penalties converted out of 15 penalties now for Fomin in his entire career. But Misha, if we do move on to the next game, which was Krasnodar Zenit. Now that game last season, and I believe the season before as well, actually sealed the title for Zenit. And the one last year was a pulsating 4-2 win for Zenit, I think, in the end. It was a brilliant match of football. How did you see what was your take on the Krasnodar Zenit game at the weekend, Misha?
First of all, I have to say that we have to consider that Krasnodar has just substituted the head coach, and it's always kind of a boost for the team. We know it's very hard always to say how long it's going to last, but it usually has an impact, and I think that the inevitable substitution of the coach. I think that Krasnodar made it at the very right point. We can argue that if Goncharenko took the job too early, maybe he needed some time to relax, to have some time off, and so on. But if we talk about this game, I think that the emotions is what Krasnodar needed most of all, because they lost the most significant, the very Krasnodarish stuff that they had previous years, and to restore them, they did need that kind of a shake. And they did get it. And I'm very happy for Alexei Ionov, for example, because there were too many questions about his ability to play on the high level. He proved that he still has it. We don't know when he's going to shine that much next time, but still he was very good at the game. At this game, it was something special for him because he was playing against his previous club, the club that probably didn't value him as much as he wanted. But I think that this game once again showed that Zenit is vulnerable, that they do not have that they do not lead as strongly as they did, for example, the end of the previous season. Their defense is not that solid. Sometimes they make mistakes, maybe too much, and the reaction of the coach here is pretty questionable to me, because they saved the game, they turned it back, they drew it. I think it's a very good result, although we can argue if there was an offside or not when Mastavo scored, but still I think that with the game against Lokomotiv coming, with this absolutely fantastic form of Lokomotiv, I think that Zenit they're not in trouble because they have 6 points margin, but Krasnodar showed that even a team in not their best conditions can cause big problems for Zenit, and previously solid defense did not look like that at all. Incredible.
I think this season as a whole has showed that Krasnodar are somewhat more vulnerable than they have been in at least the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But I thought the way they got back into the game, the way that Krasnodar let them back into it, was a little bit disappointing. You had the mix-up between Safonov and Kayo, which you see all the time from Kayo, to be honest. I think he's a vastly overrated defender and absolutely mistake-prone. But Krasnodar did step up for a lot of the game. They did play better, but it was a lot of it was individual quality, and I think you could clearly see the bounce that they've got from the changing of manager. Just the whole mood seemed to be slightly lifted. They just looked a little bit more confident, but then they did go and shoot themselves in the foot. I agree. I thought Zenit were vulnerable in this game. I thought Yaroslav Rakitsky had probably one of the worst games I've seen him have for Zenit so far. He's so good at progressing the ball up the field, both short and long, into the channels, and he was awful. He couldn't pass 5 yards, and defensively he was all over the place. Ionov, I think he was offside for the first one, but he's still totally free, running off the back of the defender's shoulder, and neither centre-back picks him up. It's really uncharacteristic of Zenit's play in the last 2 years. But I think my biggest take from this is just how frustrating VAR has been. Ionov was offside, but it wasn't given. No VAR check was implemented. In the old days, that would have just been level, continue. And then afterwards, Mostovoy is totally free for the winner in the box. But in the build-up, Magomed Shapi Suleimanov is fouled by Kuzyaev, and then Mostovoy himself is offside in a very similar position, in a very similar way to the last one. This time VAR was instigated, but he was still not given offside. I mean, you can see he is offside, and if my view, it's level, it's in the old style. But in some games, you've got this one where it's not given, and it's quite clearly is. It's a mistake. But then in other games, you have them lining up the little lines across the pit. It just there's no consistency, and this is what you were promised with VAR. So, Misha, as a last word, what do you think about VAR in general? Is it something that needs to be stuck with? I mean, they're going to regardless, I suppose.
Well, I'm a VAR believer. Actually, I think that if it works properly, it might be maybe not the game changer, but it might fulfill its destiny, what it's supposed to be. If we talk about Russian implementation of VAR, I think we have too many questions about it. Too many questions, because we have we watch every weekend how it's done in different European countries. It's done differently. The approach might be different, but when they as you have said, when one episode is being under the VAR and the same episode is not, that raises questions. We do have a lot of problems with the referees. This is one of the most significant problems in our league, and our referees are, well, I don't want to be harsh, but I think that this is probably one of the weakest generation of the referees. Yeah. And so, the episode, the situation with Vilkov and his suspension, that's one more episode. I don't know. I don't have an explanation to that. You mentioned the Sochi Spartak debacle in the first match day. But things like that can happen every day in our league, and nobody can say that we've got the lesson from that. I don't know how it works. Nobody explains that, and the explanations that we hear are not sustainable and not enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. That's the most depressing thing about it, is you either don't hear anything, like the Vilkov situation. Yes, he got the decision slightly wrong, but it's nothing really particularly galling or particularly massively wrong. And it doesn't really have much. It wasn't like the ones earlier on in the season for various clubs and against various clubs. And he's been suspended from the RPL. Oh, well, not suspended, sorry, demoted. And nobody's explained why. Like, not even a single word. They've just said, right, this has happened. Yet earlier on in the season, they were going out of their way to explain what happened with Kazartsev in the Spartak case, and it really muddied the waters. And I think it's opening a can of worms where the RFU cannot afford to get drawn into. Mike, what do you think?
If we talk about Vilkov, okay, he made mistakes, but it's not for the first time. Why now?
True, yeah.
The head of our referees, I don't know how to say it in English, Ashot Khachaturians, he was very emotional. He said that this referee will never referee again while I'm the head of the referee of the referees. I don't like that. That's not. It doesn't sound okay to me. What does it mean? It looks like it's something personal. Why do you throw the referee out right now? Why didn't you do that before? You had the opportunity. If we go back to the Krasnodar Rubin game, I suppose it was in autumn, he made a much more serious mistakes when the VIR protocol had been broken, and it was a pretext to to rematch the game. No sanctions followed. Well, he was suspended for a couple of weeks, that's all. But now, I don't know, it's too personal to me, so I don't like it.
It just seems very bizarre. I mean, the timing is odd. They could have just left it until the end of the season in literally 4 games' time and just kind of kept him to the background, being a fourth official or even a VAR referee, not in the highlights, right in the limelight, sorry, and then just done it behind the scenes, which they've done before. And then if it is an accumulation of errors, well, how many other referees have had a sheer amount of accumulation of even worse errors this season? I mean, in recent years in general, I mean, Lepochkin himself has been suspended by UEFA for something completely unrelated to refereeing decisions, as we mentioned last week. That is, it was he was approached about match fixing, but he himself, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, made some serious balls ups in the Spartak title race and the way to them winning the league that year. And nothing came of it. Kazartsev at the start of the season, he failed a polygraph test, and he's still refereeing in the RPL. It's really inconsistent and quite bizarre, and it really just gives you the indication that the referees aren't good enough, and even more worryingly, those in charge of the referees also aren't good enough in the league right now. And it's one of the biggest issues plaguing the league week in, week out. No wonder fans are so frustrated with it. But if we do move on to Sochi CSKA, and guess what? Ironically, there was also a VAR decision in that one. But this time it did look like it went entirely the right way when Nair Tiknizian handballed in the box, and it was a clear and obvious handball picked up by the video assistant referee. That was given, and of course Christian Naboa converted the penalty. Richard, how good was Sochi on the day? Were you quite impressed by them? And it was a very good result.
I was very impressed with them, James, yes. And I'll tell you something now, I think that's a good win for them because I was a little bit worried about Sochi because obviously they lost against Rubin and Lokomotiv looked like they beat them pretty easily in the cup. And I was beginning to wonder because obviously they play this high press, this gegenpressing, quick transition through the lines, football under Vladimir Fedotov. And I was beginning to wonder because Sochi have got a good squad, but they've also got an old squad. You know, a lot of those players, you know, Yusupov is 32, Naboa is 35, 36. I was beginning to wonder, is a long season now beginning to catch up with them, you know, because obviously, you know, that kind of style of football that they play does require you to have a lot of legs, and you know it requires you to have a good level of stamina. And I was beginning to wonder whether a long season was finally beginning to catch up with them with some of their recent results. But what a way for Fedotov and his team to you know put my suspicions to rest. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. I thought you know they really you know they played well and fully deserved their win against CSKA. They outplayed them and back to the kind of football that they were playing. You know, right just after the winter break. I remember watching them against Arsenal Tula, and they absolutely tore them apart in between the lines in the transition play. They had an absolutely shocking miss early doors in that game. I've forgotten the player involved who did miss that early chance, but it really was a shocker. But yeah, they're so good in the transition from midfield to attack. Sochi. All it takes sometimes for them is a couple of passes and they're in straight away. And yeah, I was very, very impressed with the performance. Back to the Sochi of just before the winter break and just after the winter break. I remember them, you know, they'd beaten Dynamo and Spartak, I think, in consecutive home games. They were really good in both those matches. And yeah, this was another good performance from them. Outplayed CSKA, who one has to say now are suddenly now embroiled in a huge fight. You know, it's looking like Lokomotiv looking likely now to finish second, and suddenly now it's a real scrap for those final 3 European slots, isn't it? And you know, Sochi still just about staying in the race. I think it's basically now Lokomotiv and Zenit I think are going to be the top 2, and I think the other 3 spots it's 3 from 5 with Sochi, Dynamo, Rubin, CSKA, and Spartak. I think for those positions. So. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting now, and maybe even in the context of what we were discussing earlier on when you know obviously Goncharенko had left CSKA, maybe that was Fedotov giving a little nudge to the top clubs in Russia, saying you know I'm still here, guys, you know. And I thought you know because he'd done an absolutely remarkable job at Sochi. But yeah, deserved win from them. Great performance, and players like Noboa still superb even at 35, 36. I honestly thought when he left Zenit that he'd slowly start to drop Noboa, but he's been absolutely brilliant this season. And at the back, they're nice and solid at the back defensively, and just another very good performance from them.
Yeah, very, very good. I think it was Kirill Zaika who missed that chance. And if anyone hasn't seen it yet, it really is, for me, the miss of the season.
It's terrible, isn't it?
He's 3 yards out from CSKA's goal with Akhmat stranded across the other side of the penalty area, and he skies it high and wide, completely unmarked in about 10 yards of room. I could not believe it at the time. I honestly thought it was Zabolotny on the end of it with his record or a day. But we're going to move on now to what was a lot of Zenit fans, well, probably one of their most enjoyable moments of the season, of course. When it comes to Zenit this season, it's been they win, number one in the wish list, and then number two, right behind that, is Spartak get tanked. And Spartak did get tanked off Ufa at home on the 99th anniversary of the club. Now, it was an absolute disaster from Spartak from front to back. It was on the club's birthday, like I mentioned, and they have now not defeated Ufa in 2.5 years. Ufa really are the specialists of going to Spartak and just getting a result. Misha, how bad was Spartak on the day? And the season's just unraveling before our eyes.
This is a very bad idea to play on the birthday of a club. I don't like it at all. It always usually it usually ends badly, and this is one of those examples. Do you remember how many talks there have been before the Premier League kicked off this season in summer about two so-called farm clubs for Spartak Moscow, Khimki and Ufa? Spartak defeated Khimki. That's understandable. But if we talk about Ufa, they have only 1 point out of 6. So the farm club wins during the season. That's insane. But this calamity, I think, has pretty deep roots because we were too much, fascinated by Spartak at the beginning of the second part of the season, but the game against Lokomotiv showed that Spartak wasn't that good. Okay, they scored 5 against Ural, they scored 6 against Krasnodar, but those teams did have very, very deep problems, and Spartak's attack was really good. But if we talk about the ability to react, to rebuild during the game, this is not about Spartak Moscow today. And their defeat against Ufa, it's flabbergasting, but I think it's absolutely earned by Ufa. They played better. They found the weak spots and they pressed on them, and they won. I think this is one of the victories that happened not only on the pitch but before the game at the table, the preparation desk or something at the head coach desk. This is one of those examples.
Yeah, I think Spartak this season really are bullies of the small clubs. If you look at their records, they have defeated Loko once and defeated Dynamo once, but every single other game against anybody else in the top 5, they haven't won. And it really stretches that defence. That defence is just absolutely shocking at times. Ufa tore them apart. Now, I will take a second on Ufa because they obviously won last weekend, and we were hesitant to give them too much credit in spite of it being a very good performance and victory, just because Stukalov had only been in the job for 2 or 3 days, absolute maximum. He'd only taken 1.5 training sessions by his own admission. So we didn't really want to get too overexcited about it. But I think Sunday proved that you can. Shamil Gazizov must have been the happiest man in Moscow during the entirety of that 90 minutes, considering what's went on with the other part of the season. But in the end, Zizho sent off. Now he's suspended for the CSKA derby. And they had youngster Dmitry Markitasov, who's quite a talented but raw young attacking midfielder, playing at centre-back. So what the hell was Tedesco doing? And for the entirety of the second half, Ufa were just cutting through them like a knife through butter with some really brilliantly executed counter-attacks, and they were absolutely flying. Even aside from that, the 3 goals, early on they hit the post, and Common Andrich up front had a hat-trick of really bad misses. If it wasn't for those misses and the wrong side of a post, imagine discussing Ufa defeating Spartak 7-0 after the season that they've had. Obviously, that's a hypothetical, it didn't happen, but it just goes to show how much better Ufa were on the day. They were genuinely brilliant. Richard, any thoughts on Spartak Ufa?
Yeah, just to say about Misha's reference to play on your birthday. The most infamous example of that is on Real Madrid's 100th birthday in 2002. They played the final of the Spanish Cup against Deportivo, and they were playing it at their own Santiago Bernabeu stadium. They lost to Deportivo at home in front of their own fans on their 100th birthday. So that's probably the worst ever example of letting your fans down on your big day out, but and especially on a centenary as well. So yeah, but onto the Spartak thing. Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder because I've seen this season in other leagues, like for example in Germany. I remember when there was all the speculation about about in Borussia Mönchengladbach with Marco Rose. Now he was obviously being linked with the Borussia Dortmund job, and eventually he will be the Dortmund coach next season. But I remember when all those links with Rose and all that speculation with Rose to Dortmund in the press, I'm wondering that affected Mönchengladbach. There was a lot of poor results from them, and it was only when it was officially confirmed and it was like, right, both parties were like, right, this is happening next season, where Gladbach started to get better results. Now I'm beginning to wonder whether Spartak really need to start now pressing Tedesco for an answer on his future. Is it a definite? Are you staying or are you going? Because it's such a shame to see it unravel like this. Because it was only 2-3 weeks ago where we were talking about, are Spartak just about still in with a chance? Are they still going to push it right to the very end, this title challenge? And the last 2 games have just seen it against Lokomotiv, and even more worryingly now with this result against Ufa, it really fall off a cliff, and it is a shame. Full credit to Ufa, though. I've not seen the match, but full credit to them for these 2 good wins, and they're putting themselves into a good position for those relegation playoffs now, getting themselves into some good form. But yeah, I think Spartak really do now need to press Tedesco for an absolute final decision on this, because they need to get talking to potential replacements ASAP, and it's just the players must know as well, what is going on with them. They need to know an answer, because it must affect players, not just fans and everybody else. I think really there needs to be an answer for this now, because the longer it drags on, I fear it's only going to get worse, really.
Yeah, I think it will get worse as well. It's funny that we all mentioned the birthday, because Spartak have got a weird history of playing on their birthday on the 18th of April. On the 50th birthday, they drew with Dynamo Tbilisi in the Vysshaya Liga. And they didn't win, of course. That's also a little bit of a pattern. By no means on its own then a disastrous result. Of course, Dynamo Tbilisi were far more successful in the 1970s than they are now. But that's even then with the team of like Andreev and Kasainov, and in particular Nikita Simonyan in there, and they still didn't win. So if they didn't win then they're definitely not going to win now with the lineup they've got compared. Misha, as one last word on Spartak, Richard mentioned there the Tedesco's future. What do you think? There's been a lot of people who are suggesting online, all Spartak fans, of course, that they think that Tedesco might actually stay at the end of the season in like a little bit of a shock opinion. What do you think? Do you think he's definitely off or not?
Well, there has been kind of a conspiracy theory about Tedesco. I think. Well, I hope this is a solved question. I hope that he leaves, not because I don't like him, but if this is a kind of a game they are playing with when they announce that he's leaving, then he shows some good results, and so he stays. And this was done just to relax the team, to put some weight off their shoulder. No, I don't believe it. They do. Spartak does need a change. They need a structural change, I'm afraid, because not the question is not only with the head coach. The question is with the sports management, with the sports director, with what way of development do they choose? Which path do they choose? They have a lot of young players. Are they good enough? I think that example of Maslov showed that, well, probably talented players are not ready yet for big international matches, and Spartak Moscow wants to play in the Champions League. Are they ready to spend much money? How much? Who is going to manage the team next year? Is it going to be Fonseca? This is one way of one style of playing and managing the club. The Zerbi, it's the other. Where are they moving? We don't know. They have some players on loan. For example, as Moses, he most definitely is going to leave in summer. But they bought some players this winter. What is going to happen to them when the new coach arrives, and probably he doesn't like him? Maybe he just does not consider them to be the starting 11. What's going to happen? There are too many questions to me, and I think that nobody can answer them, even Leonid Fedun and anybody in the club, because they don't know what's going to happen next. This is my takeaway. I don't want to say that I know some insight. It just seems to me like that it's something like that.
Yeah, it's once again quite a monumental mess over at Spartak, and even as a Spartak fan myself, I don't think I'd have it any other way right now. There's something bizarrely warming and soothing in Spartak being a mess. Just like the length of time that each of their recent sporting directors have actually endured at the club is a joke. Everything going on behind the scenes and who is influencing Fedun where and why is there external advisors who are with Fedun in the executive boxes at every match who are not on a payroll at the club officially, and what's their role and who's in charge. It, like you say, Misha, they just need an entire structural rebuild. It's frustrating, but any last words on Spartak Ufa before we move on to the semi-finals, Misha?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it briefly. I can totally understand the fixation on the 100 years anniversary. It would be absolutely normal for anybody. So why don't you start building something in advance? For example, 3 years prior to that date, if you want to win something huge, if you want to celebrate it like no one has ever done in Russia, why don't you start building a little bit before? Because now next year is going to be that 100 years anniversary. And what does Spartak have now to win anything next year? Not much. That says a lot to me. I think that the changes in Spartak must start in the managerial team, somewhere in the sports directing office and something like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit ironic that, Spartak have got a huge history, and to be fair to those at the club, they hold that history with a huge amount of respect. Speaking to people at the lower echelons of the club who I know personally and who I've met professionally, you can see that all who work for the club really do respect that history in the highest regard. They're one of the only clubs I can think of who have a statue on the inside of the stadium right next to the pitch. The 4 Staritsyn brothers are there. Their presence is huge in the history of Spartak, and their presence is literal in that the 4 men are on the bench on the side of the pitch as they used to be, and as there will be for eternity. It's a wonderful homage to them, but I can't help but feel that Nikolai Staritsyn in particular, who spent time in the Gulag for this club, who created them from nothing, created this sporting society from very little compared to where the others were created in the 1920s, would be highly disappointed in Spartak's direction, in how they are being run as a club from the very top to the bottom. It's a shame, actually, that they both... It's this weird juxtaposition, and it's almost oxymoronic in its juxtaposition, that they both have this history in such high regard, but are seemingly doing very little about trying to create any more. Because, look, Spartak is an institution. It's the most high-supported club in the country. And what are they most famous for right now? It's they're being made a mockery of. And it's not good enough. It's simply not good enough from Liana Fadun. But if we will move on to the semi-finals, the Cup of Russia semi-finals, which took place on Wednesday afternoon. We'll start off with the Moscow derby, in which Lokomotiv defeated CSKA 3-0 at the RGD Arena. Misha, you caught that game. Were you impressed by Loko again with another strong win against a big rival?
Well, I was in a kind of a way, but this is that occasion when you open the newspaper and you see the result and you look at the stats and you draw a picture, but it's wrong. It was not that huge difference. CSKA played well. Of course, they didn't play well enough maybe to win, but Loko was extremely lucky at all the 3 goals that they scored. It doesn't mean that I don't want to underestimate their abilities to beat almost anybody in the Russian league right now, but that was not so. It was, well, you had to watch the game and not be carried away with the result. But still, when a team is well prepared, when they have no physical problems, when they have a lot of players from the bench that transfer the game and etc. etc. Sometimes you are lucky, and the moments that can go either way when you are good enough, they go your way. That's quite common in football, and so I think that it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be questionable. They were better than CSKA, maybe not that much. 3-0 is quite a huge difference, but on the pitch it was not that big. I wanted to find something from Olic, actually. I wanted to see what could he bring to CSKA now. And I think that it's still something to look for. I don't believe that he can change the course of things at CSKA at the moment, and hence the lack of chances against Lokomotiv at that evening.
Yeah, it very much seems like they are bereft of the same issues that Goncharenko was also plagued by. CSKA looked like you mentioned earlier that Goncharenko provided somewhat of a managerial bounce in Krasnodar. Stukalov certainly is at Ufa, even if all he's doing is just building confidence and momentum in his players. CSKA look exactly the same. The lineups are very, very similar. I mean, their approach play is incredibly similar. Everything is just... It's like as if it continued on as it was, but with a different man at the helm. And I must admit, we all in previous podcasts, Misha, we were slightly questionable of the appointment just because he is a club legend. And yes, he's got experience as an assistant at in the Croatian national team, but it just doesn't really make sense why he's been hired, aside from the fact that he is a club legend and he was brilliant for CSKA when he was there. But the only real changes has been that Jagoyev is fit for the first time in what feels like forever, and Mario Fernandez is out injured. But what I liked about Lokomotiv is I read an analysis from a Lokomotiv fan, Ilya Vasilyev, and he was very balanced and very measured, which was nice to see. But he mentioned that they had a huge slice of luck, of course, which they definitely have. I agree with that, Misha, entirely. But he liked their killer instinct. They don't create much. They don't dominate much. They're usually on the back foot for a lot of games. But their killer instinct in front of goal and the solidity at the back is really what Nikolic has brought to the team. Richard, have you got any last words on the Moscow derby in the cup midweek?
Just more on the appointment of Olic, and just to come on what you've been saying there, James. I actually watched them against. I didn't see both the cup matches, but I did see the. Obviously, I watched the Sochi CSKA game, and I was thinking pretty much similar to what you were just saying there. When I was watching that game, I was thinking to myself, has anything actually really changed that much here from 3-4 weeks ago when Goncharenko was in charge? It was quite, it was a bit interesting, and also I think it was important to remember that. Okay, Olic's got 3 wins from his opening 3 games, but you also have to remember those. One was against Arsenal Tula in the Cup, who've had a poor season. They're in the bottom 4. And the other 2 were against Tambov and Rotor, the 2 sides who are pretty likely to get relegated. And in the Tambov game, both the winning goals were penalties. So, yeah, it's not been a brilliant start for Olic so far. Been okay in terms of results, but yeah, in terms of performances, I haven't seen, like you say, the spark from Stukalov. I haven't from Stukalov going to Ufa. I haven't seen that at CSKA. So it will be interesting, and I do think it is quite interesting too how Olic's contract. I was checking on Transfermarkt the other day. Olic's contract is only till the end of next season, so it does make you wonder whether CSKA, whilst they're happy to give him a chance, it's also very much a trial thing. I think he's going to have to hit the ground running early next season, I think. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens. CSKA are a real fascinating crossroads because, they've still got a few older players in this team. They've defensive issues at the moment with a few players out injured. And then, there's the future of Rondon. Have they got a buy option with the loan? I don't really know. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer for Olic and CSKA, I think.
Yeah, certainly. But it was a good result of Loko when they are in the cup final again, which has become a little bit of a love letter for Lokomotiv in recent years. Now, Lokomotiv's opponents are FNL sides Krylia Sovietov, who continued their unbelievably strong form this season. The match itself in Grozny was a 0-0 draw with Akhmat, went to penalties, and Krylia then prevailed 4-1 on penalties. And I must admit, I'm a little bit, not disappointed, but I feel a little bit sorry for Krylia in the aftermath of how it's being covered in the media, because a lot of the focus is on social media in particularly. A lot of the focus has been on Akhmat's penalties in Berisha's awful pass back to Lomayev, and then in particular a lot has been on Gudiev's goalkeeping for Ivan Sergeyev's penalty. But I think a lot of that is unfortunately taken away from just how good Krylia have been, not only in the FNL this season, but against top to mid-tier RPL sides in the Cup of Russia. And before we started recording, Misha, you mentioned that you particularly wanted to talk about Krylia in general. So, Misha, how have you seen Krylia's season coming along, and how impressed are you with how they've responded from relegation?
Well, I am. This is really huge, and I hope that they are not going blast this chance again, because this is a story that is very familiar to the Krylia Sovietov fans, because when things go south, when they are relegated, they try to rebuild, and they make a very very beautiful team. They play very offensively. They do have very good players. For example, one of the previous examples was when Andrei Tikhonov was the head coach, and when they were playing quick short pass at the FNL, and when they got promoted to the Premier League, they just totally changed, absolutely, and they did not survive. This time, I hope that they have a chance not to give up on their strongest on what they do the best, because they do have a coach who is very good at working with the young players. Asinkin worked in Chertanova, and there are some. This is one of the best academies in Russia at the moment. Yeah, probably one of the three best, maybe. And there are a lot of players who grew up in Chertanova. He knows them very well. Um, he trusts them, they trust him, and they feel that they can do huge things. They are doing them right now. They have a lot of young players at starting 11. Well, for example, Zinkovsky is still, well, maybe he's not a youngster, maybe he's not a teenager, but he's far from being a veteran. So he has all his career ahead. Ivan Sergeyev is extremely good. He is very close to break the goal scoring record for the FNL. And I like Krylia Sovetov, but this happens very often when they play in the lower league. The question is, what's happening to them when they qualify to the Premier League? What is going to happen this time? And I hope that this time is going to be different. By the way, on the road to the final, they defeated three Premier League teams. Khimki, which were very good under Cherevchenko. They beat Dynamo Moscow. We've talked about them, and now they beat Akhmat, who are playing very well. They played at home. So this is the proof that Krylia can play against different teams, and they are equally successful against almost, well, any opposition in Premier League so far.
Yeah, certainly. I think I've been very, very impressed by them, and it would be remiss of me, and David, our RFN David, would probably have a go at me if I didn't say that Sergeyev has actually now broken the record of goals in the FNL, which is just an unbelievable achievement of how many it is. But for Krylia, they've never won the Russian Cup. They never won the Soviet Cup in their previous guises. The last time they got through to the final was in 2004 when they lost against Terek, and Terek scored a 90-second winner on the day in the Lokomotiv Stadium in that year, and they've only been at the final two times before that, both as Zenit Kubyshev in the 50s, and they lost to Dynamo, and then as Krylia Sovietov Kubyshev, which is another former guys, in 1964, and they lost to Dynamo Kiev in the final. So they've never won it. It would be brilliant for them and their fans, their passionate fan base down in the south, which, I mean, you hear a cliche about football that there are hotbeds, and it's a cliche because it's true, and down in the South Samara Volga region, that is a true hotbed of football. The people, their attendances at any level they're at are unbelievable. Their attendances in 2009-10, when they were in the old Metallurg Stadium, which was by no means the biggest in the league at all at the time. They were under a transfer embargo. They had huge debts and were actually almost removed from the league. It was the biggest attendance in the league that season, in the entirety of Russia. These are real passionate fans, and it's so good to see them doing it on the back of Chertanova's success. It's a shame for Chertanova, but they will regroup. They will get their next group of academy kids through. They'll probably get promoted again. They will be fine. But to see all of these players follow Osyenkin and play the way they have is just a breath of fresh air. And they're currently probably better than actually a lot of the teams in the bottom end of the RPL. I really can't wax lyrically enough about how strong Krylia have been this season. And on that, because Krylia are FNL side and because the final does take place in Nizhny, Richard, do you have any last words on the Akhmat Krylia game in particular? And I believe you want to go through some of the latest in the FNL and what's going to be coming up in the FNL too.
Yeah, just more of a point on Krylia. It'd be interesting if you could put them in the RPL now and see where they would actually finish with this team, because obviously, like Misha said, they've beaten three pretty decent RPL sides. Dynamo, who are going for a top 5 finish, and they've also beaten Khimki and Akhmat, both solid mid-table teams. So they've beaten all three of those sides in the cup. So it'd be actually interesting to see if you put them, obviously, in a league. A cup game is different to league. Obviously, the league is a grind where you can get yourself up for, the league is a week by week grind, and you're going to have peaks and troughs during the season, whereas the cup, you can get yourself up for one big game. But I actually do think that, if you put Krylia in the RPL right now, I think they'd probably finish ahead of the bottom four. They with the squad that they have, or it'd be very close at least. They certainly look a lot better than Rotor and Ufa, and they look comfortably equal of Rotor and Tambov, and they look comfortably the equal of Arsenal, Tula, and Ufa at the minimum. So it does make you wonder. I'm intrigued as well. Like Misha said, will they continue on this attacking style in the RPL next season? As I said, it looked like they've got a squad that's capable of making the step up already, so they might look to keep it together. We often see a lot of sides who come up in any league, in any country, and they sometimes, some sides come up and change the side. Sometimes some sides come up and just make a few changes here and there. I think Krylia are in the latter of that category. They don't need to make a huge amount of changes. They're going to make signings, obviously, but rather than change 9, 10, 11 players in the summer, they might only need to do 4, 5, 6 transfers, and they can concentrate on quality rather than quantity, because the 8 Chertanova kids, as we've said, who've been promoted there, have done really well. In CSKA, I'm really fascinated to see how he does next season. Could Russian football have maybe a Jamie Vardy style player on their hands there, a late bloomer, because I think he's 25. So I think that would be absolutely fantastic if he could make the step up. And Russian football needs as many good strikers as it can get at the moment, because there's not a huge amount of them around, So I'm really fascinated. I'm delighted for them as well. Like you said, Samara is a hotbed of football in Russia, and I think the Lokomotiv game in the final might be a step too far for them, but they look pretty good to be securing promotion from the FNL. They look like they're only 2 or 3 wins away from that. So if they can get that signed, sealed, and done in the last few games of the FNL season, they can, then rest players for the final. So I think Lokomotiv will be a step too far, but just to get to the final, remarkable achievement from them, absolutely fantastic. And let's see if the goal machine, Sergeyev, can carry on scoring at the weekend when they play already doomed to relegation Shinnik. That would be quite interesting. But just to quickly come in, one last, about the FNL. There is a huge game tomorrow, probably as big a game as a number of the games in the RPL this weekend, and it is the battle between second and third place in the league. It's Orenburg versus Nizhny Novgorod. And there are 2 points between them. Nizhny in second at the minute, Orenburg in third. The game is at Orenburg's Gasovic Stadium. And this pretty much is, with the run-ins both sides have got from now to the end of the FNL season, this is basically a promotion decider. Whoever wins this probably will go up alongside Krylia from the FNL. So it's a game I'll be tuning into tomorrow at 11 a.m. UK time, 12 and noon Central European time, and 1 Moscow St. Petersburg time. So that's a game to definitely watch in the RPL this week. In the FNL this week. Definitely the game of the week, and one of the games of the weekend in Russia, full stop. And I'm looking forward to it. So if you're interested, it's 11 a.m. tomorrow in the UK. For any of our listeners in the UK, 11 a.m. UK time on Sport Rex.
And Mike, any last words for yourself on Krylia and the Cup semi-finals?
I wanted to say some words about the Cup final, because we all understand that there's going to be a terrific pressure on Lokomotiv. Anything but win is going to be a disaster. Nobody will understand how the FNL team wins the cup, and this is a huge advantage for Krylia, in my opinion, because this feeling that they can make history, not only as a second tier team winning the national cup. It has happened in Russia already, maybe a couple of times, but winning the first major trophy in their history in a game where they are not going to be considered as strong favorites. They are just going to be underdogs. I think this might be an advantage for them. Probably it's not professional, but I will support Krylia in the final, actually. I want to believe in this story.
I'm going to say that. I'm going to be agreeing with that too. If anything, just to annoy Ilya, the local Loko fan, which is always worth it. Now, if we move on to the last topic of today, which at first will be, unfortunately, a little bit of a monologue from myself for a little while, where I cover all bases of the Super League for now. Now, obviously, everybody knows about the Super League and what's been going on. You don't need me to get into much of that, really, but I will just discuss the Russian position, that of the RFU, the RPL, and a couple of experts. Now, the president of the RFU, Alexander Dukov, has claimed that the RFU supports the position of UEFA and other European federations. The big part of his statement was that the idea contradicts the basic values of not only football, but the entire of the European community. The new tournament completely destroys the stable system of football development that has been developed over the years, based on the quality and interests of all fans and members of the industry. It will jeopardise the prospects of national teams and their players, erase the long-term work of UEFA and FIFA. Now, before we get into the irony of the president of the RFU not liking the unstable system of football development that may exist, considering the RFU itself is overseeing an unstable system of footballing development, it's quite clear that the Zhukov and the RFU as a body were vehemently against it. The RPL joined them in that position and the president, Sergei Plyadkin, said the RPL is in solidarity with the position of UEFA and European leagues, and it was the same statement, exactly the same, word for word, basically, that the RFU released themselves. It was a joint statement, both in support of the opposition to the ESL and Alexander Seferin and the UEFA's position. The best statement that anybody released over the entirety of the debacle is actually Sochi CEO Dmitry Rubashko. And when Rubashko was asked about the European Super League, he said, I absolutely do not want to discuss this whatsoever. We have 4 rounds. We've got to climb the standings and solve our problems. This is not one of our problems, which is just absolutely brilliant because, look, I'm glad the RFU had a position. I'm glad the RPL had a position. But as I said, as I joked to the guys early pod, everyone listening, it's a little bit like a non-league English club saying that we don't want to join the Super League. Like, okay, fine. We know you're against it. Like, it's not going to happen anyway. But this continued with lots of expert opinions. Yuri Syomin heavily criticised it. He said football belongs to the fans. Nobody asked them about it. Not only the fans of these teams, but of the world. 12 people cannot solve such a serious issue. And there is no sporting principle here. This is not bad only just for Russia, but for the rest. Once upon a time, Savina Zvezda played in the Champions League final. Anyone who was good can make it to the finals on sporting basis alone. And then Anatoly Bishovets also spoke out against it, but you get the point. It's basically everybody who isn't in that 12, as is everybody with an ounce of footballing now, is completely against the unequalness and the breakaway nature of this competition. Now, I will quickly finish in saying that part of the Super League was to part of this debacle while it was happening in the background. The UEFA had passed the new Champions League format, which is going to have or would take place from 2024-25 season, with 4 additional slots reserved for top clubs at the moment as things stand. A maximum quota from one top league will be 6, and it'll operate on the Swiss system. The clubs will have 10 matches, 5 at home, 5 away, no group stage. And the opponents are selected based on similar results. Winners play winners, losers play losers, and so on, and down the table like that. After that, the first 8 teams advance to the playoffs, while 9 to 24th have an extra round for reaching the quarterfinals. 25th to 36th are eliminated. So it's quite a big change, and there's a lot of backlash against this. And I will finish that, as of today, the Spanish newspaper and media conglomerate AS are reporting that the 12 clubs involved are actually set to avoid UEFA sanctioned punishment in the immediacy regarding being kicked out of the UCL, that they will not be punished right now, but the UEFA are still considering longer term punishments. So after that long and monotonous and boring preamble of what's kind of went on in the Russian position, Richard, I just wanted to know, what is your general thoughts on the European Super League?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that I was actually completely against the proposals, pretty much to reiterate the position of the RFU. I've no doubt to reiterate all three of us' position on this is that I was completely against it, on a sporting principle situation. And ultimately, I got back into football. Me and you, James, we both follow third tier sides in England. It's a chance my side might never get to the English Premier League again. I know that Sunderland are 6 times champions of England in the past. There's a chance that, they might not win another English title again. But there is still, whilst the current format exists, there is still that dream is still on the table. Wigan Athletic might play in the Premier League again. Sunderland might win a championship or a trophy again, in a major trophy again in the future. As long as that has to remain on the table for every single club in every single country's pyramid. I remember I watched Spanish football a lot. I remember my first season following La Liga. Real Sociedad nearly won the league, and everybody cheered that on mercilessly, like in Spain, I can imagine, except for Real Madrid supporters who eventually won the league instead of them. And also from the perspective of the top 5 the leagues outside of Europe's top 5 as well. The proposals on the table for that Super League, when they said we need more games between the sides, the big sides of Europe. It almost in a way that it almost gave the arrogant sense that, well, they are the only sides that can create the memories. Well, I bring to you Leicester 2015-16, memorable English title win, near relegation the season before, title win the season after, something truly remarkable. Montpellier winning Ligue 1 in France in 2011-12. Why I'm speaking on this podcast right now is purely because what motivated me to really get in touch with you guys and write for Russian Football News. Rostov, nearly relegated in 2014-15, nearly became the Leicester City of Russia in 2015-16. Everybody apart from CSKA fans were cheering Rostov to win the league that season. It was such a shame that they didn't manage to do it. But that is what the beauty of sport is, that the underdog has a chance. And some of my memories in the Champions League, Mourinho's Porto side, Rebrov and Shevchenko getting to the semi-finals with Dynamo Kiev in 1998, 1999, both that really launched both of their careers, especially Shevchenko. Situations like Apoel Nicosia getting to the quarterfinals of the Champions League in 2011-12 as a Cypriot team. There's been other sides as well. Leonid Slutsky, making an impression in 2009-10 with CSKA getting into the quarterfinals. Ajax a couple of years ago when they just missed out on the final of the Champions League. Some of the most memorable moments from the Champions League has been from non-Big 5 league teams. And, these 12 clubs had the audacity to say to everybody else, both in their own pyramids and outside of the top 5 leagues, we are basically trying to take that away from you. I think it was outrageous, and I'm just really disappointed in them. And I'm so happy that the football community everywhere pulled together to make sure it was stopped. I was really happy that the German Bundesliga sides and PSG also took a firm stance against this. And I'm really happy also that fans of those clubs came together with an almost unanimous disapproval of it and put the proposal to bed, full stop. Well, maybe not full stop, but for the time being, it's definitely off the table. And I was really encouraged to see the unified response against this. Now, look, UEFA's proposals are not great either. I still think they're very disproportionate against the non-Big 5 leagues. I'm still not a fan of this potential for wildcards and this Swiss system style where it's going to be 10 group games, which now actually puts pressure on the league system in England, because it might mean the end of the English League, the English EFL League Cup. So I'm not a fan of that. And I think already in football, it's getting a bit oversaturated with the amount of games that we are playing. I'd rather see fewer games of more quality rather than more games of less quality. So, and UEFA have got a lot to answer for from some other situations that they've had in the past. However, at the end of the day, the UEFA proposal is still the lesser of two evils compared to what the Super League was. However, that should not stop the clubs, federations, and individuals in the game, now starting to say to UEFA, right, okay, this proposal that you've got isn't great either. And I have actually heard reports that UEFA might even now be considering, removing the wildcard aspect of it for, coefficient teams qualifying for the Champions League based on past performance if they don't qualify for the league. I have heard that could be off the table. So hopefully there'll be some pressure on that, because I think that is disproportionate too. I think that is against the very principle of qualifying through merit for the Champions League through the league. So hopefully, yes, there's a lot of reform that UEFA do need to do. They need to sharpen up their act on certain things, but I am on their side in this because I think this Super League proposal was absolutely ridiculous, and I'm very glad it was shot down by loads of people in the football community, as we can agree on, as millions of others around the world can agree on too.
One thing that's really not sat well with me is the reaction to Sky Sports and UEFA after the fact, that they are almost saviours of the game, and that's not true. Yes, they are on the fan side in this matter, but they haven't been for the 20 years before, and they probably won't be for the next 10 or however long it is until this happens again. They're only on our side because they're out of pocket. UEFA, if only UEFA did as much at battling corruption in UEFA than they have at battling potential loss of revenue, then football would be a better sport worldwide, without a shadow of a doubt. If this is something, though, that allows the fans, football fans, and regular people around the world to develop somewhat of a class consciousness, then great. Finally, football fans are doing that, finally realising that people are stronger together. And we've held the Super League to account. Well, next will be Sky Sports, hopefully. After that, UEFA, they need to be held to account as well for what they've done. But right now, they're on our side, and the Super League is the big bad guy. Now, their proposals are nothing short than despicable in my eyes. And from a Russian perspective, a Russian football perspective, two dates really stick in my mind. 26th of September 1995 and the 20th of October 2009. On the first one in 1995, Rotor Volgograd travelled to Old Trafford and drew with Man United 2-2 and defeated them in away goals. In 2009, Rubin Kazan pulled off in what is my eyes the greatest giant killing in Champions League history, defeating Barcelona 2-1 at the Camp Nou thanks to a wonderful winner from Gökdeniz Karadeniz. If they had got their way, that would never exist. It's not about money. It's not, but it is. But it's not about the big teams playing each other. It's not about that at all. It's about them stopping this. It's about them keeping their status quo. Florentino Perez is an out-of-touch septuagenarian, trying to tell generations younger than even we all are how to think about football and how they think about football. I'm not surprised that they were insulted by his comments. I'm not surprised that we're all disgusted and everybody across the world was disgusted by the nature of their proposals. And equally not surprised that it happened and it will happen again, and they've tried it before. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Misha, what were your general thoughts on the Super League and how could it potentially have affected Russia?
Well, it's very hard to say. I don't think that it would influence Russian football somehow. Just to add small memory from myself. It was 1998. The Russian economy collapsed in August. The rate of the Russian ruble fell down 3 times in a couple of weeks. So it was a complete disaster. The economy was ruined. And in September, maybe October that year, Real Madrid with Gus Hiddink as the head coach arrived to Moscow to play the Champions League, and Spartak defeated them 2-1 at the 84,000 attendance at Luzhniki. That was something absolutely incredible. It didn't help the economy, but it was, well, I don't know how to explain that. That was such a relief for maybe a couple of days for people. Just it didn't solve the problems, but it was the fresh air that we all needed. And imagine that this is not going to happen ever. Well, this is just ridiculous. I've heard some somebody trying to compare the players of the Super League and the Northern American leagues. I don't think that it's the right comparison, because the Northern American leagues in baseball, in basketball, in hockey, NHL, and all the rest leagues, they were founded around some clubs. So the system had not changed there. They expanded their leagues, but they didn't break. They hadn't. They didn't have to break something that had existed before them. And in Europe, this is what was going to happen. The idea, the most loud voice and the most significant point that they are raising, that they want to have more money because they are top clubs. They create the content that everybody's watching, and so they want their huge share. Well, okay, I don't buy it. You're not that poor. You're not that struggling. Maybe you just try some other ways to overcome your financial problem. Well, I don't believe him. I don't. But those tears are crocodile tears. I don't believe him at all. If we talk about Russia, the only thing how it touches us, I think. Well, of course, it's weird for me to hear any comments from Russian football bodies, because we are somewhere, I don't know, maybe Mars is closer to the Super League than Russian teams right now. So what are we talking about? How can we be offended by that? Only if the Champions League does not exist anymore in the way that it had existed previous years, and the prize money are cut, and that's how Russian teams might be affected. But if we look at the qualification of the Russian teams to the playoffs in the European Cups for the previous 2 seasons, we will find only one team qualifying to the round of 16 in Europa League. It was Krasnodar this year. Previous year, we had 0 teams qualifying. So I think that we're somewhere on the periphery of the of these events. So it made me laugh when I had Russian very staunch position that we are against that, we don't like that. Yeah, okay. How can we be offended here anyway? Well, okay, but we had to say something. We had to say something because the head of the Russian Football Union is a political figure, and he has to say something. But by the way, I think this idea has been put on ice. I don't think that it's buried completely. I think that they will. Mm-hmm. They just tested the how do you say it in English? Tested the waters. And I'm afraid they're going to be back with that idea maybe a couple of years later.
Absolutely. They're definitely not backing down. I think it was telling in the statements of those clubs who withdrew that they either totally refused to apologise or totally refused to admit any or accept any accountability for it. Some of them said that they are leaving, but none of them said that it's ending. Most of them didn't even address their fans. They called them stakeholders. Barcelona's called them customers and they literally said that their fans are customers and that they will continue to explore avenues for the Super League in the future, just not right now. It baffles the mind just how insensitive these people are and how bad at reading the room they are. I mean, it baffles the mind, but that's exactly the type of person they are. I suppose it's not that surprising. But yeah, I agree. The only way it could have affected Russia is a negative consequence. I don't think any of the clubs would be invited. I think the only one who could one day would probably be Zenit. And I think it would be probably related more so because of a sympathy where it's, we will let them in 1 year just so Russia can have their 1 year or something like that. It would be patronising why they're being invited. But even if they are, how would they benefit? I mean, look, Russia will no longer see the strongest teams, or if you do, it would be unbelievably imbalanced. All sponsorship would go to the level above. The Champions League, as you said, Misha, would just crumble. And none of the Russian clubs would either, like in theory, when they played there, would either lose constantly and be the whipping boys of the league, or would have to spend such an inordinate amount of money to even get anywhere near a level playing field that it wouldn't be worth it. I mean, imagine if Zenit, just theoretically or hypothetically, did get chosen for a Super League and then went into the Super League with an 8-man squad limit for foreigners in place. They'd get tonked week in, week out by all of them. There'd just be no benefit whatsoever for them. So, the RFU kind of had to say something. I mean, they even pulled out Lebedev from the cupboard and said, "There you go, have your monthly little word on the matter," and then stop talking again. Richard, any last words from yourself on the Super League and how it might affect Russia and so on?
Yeah, it's interesting how I actually agree with Misha. I don't actually think this is done yet, and the telling. I actually follow a lot of Spanish and Italian football, and I listen to a few Spanish football podcasts, and there has been the reaction, and there's still Laporta still mentioning that this is on the table, and you've only seen Florentino Perez's remarks on Spanish radio and television recently, and I have seen as well online, judging from the I click on a lot of things on Twitter, and I have seen much more opposition to this from the 6 English clubs involved and their fan bases compared to the 3 Spanish clubs and the 3 Italian clubs. I think there is that sense in Spain and in Italy from Juventus, Real Madrid, Barcelona supporters that they probably would find the idea, and don't get me wrong, I think the idea of the Super League is absolutely abhorrent, and I'm completely 100% against it. I never want to see anything like this attempted ever again, but you do get the impression that a decent chunk of their fan base do actually want to play more games against the big English teams rather than the smaller teams in their country, and it is sad and regrettable that is the case. I saw some figures for La Liga's television distribution recently, and Sevilla are only 6 points off La Liga's leaders Atletico with 5 games to go. They've got an outside chance of winning La Liga this season for the first time since 1946. Apparently, Sevilla earn less than 1/3 of Real Madrid and Barcelona's television income for the 2019-20 season. Yet they're up there competing with them, and that just shows you, doesn't it? That and to be fair to the Spanish Federation, they have tried in recent years to the gap used to be larger, in terms of the money that Real Madrid and Barca compared to the others gets. They have evened it out a bit more in recent years, even though in England it's still a lot more even than in Spain, and there's still a lot of work to do. So, but yeah, it's pure arrogance. And okay, I've seen quite a number of people saying about the Super League, well, UEFA is, it's not, look at the situation in UEFA at the moment, look at these reforms, this is why we have to do this. Well, yes, nobody is saying that the situation in UEFA is perfect at the moment. Everybody knows that there is an awful lot of scrutiny that should still be placed on UEFA. There is still they've got a lot of things that they've done poorly in the past, and they're still doing poorly now. They've given too much power to the big teams before, too much bias towards the top 5 leagues. They've not really catered for the other leagues in Europe. So nobody's saying that there's not issues at UEFA, but to allow 12 teams to take control of football and basically create their own cabal is just totally wrong as well. And 2 wrongs do not make a right. Just because UEFA have been done poorly doing things in the past doesn't mean this gives an excuse for this power grab. And we in our work at RFN, we've obviously branched out recently to fellow podcasters who cover other non-Big 5 leagues, and it's fantastic covering these leagues for people who might not have that much knowledge outside of the top 5 European leagues, or even football just in the league in the country that they're from. They follow a Big 5 league, so it's good to branch out and all of us do a lot of good hard work in promoting these leagues to people, and to see them, potentially taken away from us with this closed shop system is just, it's just a complete and utter nonsense. And like I say, some of the memories that Misha mentioned there about that Spartak victory over Real Madrid. My first memory of Russian football was Spartak beating Arsenal 4-1 in Moscow. And in 2000, I remember that game. I think Robson, Yegor Titov scored. That was the first memory of Russian football that I got, and it really got me interested in leagues outside of, the Premier League. It cannot be taken away from people. And, the attitude of the American owners at Manchester United, Liverpool and Arsenal, and from people like, Perez and people like Agnelli, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. But sadly, like Misha said, I really don't think it's off the table, unfortunately. And I think this might be back on the table in a few years. I really hope it's not. But it's going to be an interesting couple of the fallout from this will be quite interesting, that's for sure.
You can almost guarantee it will be back on the table, especially with a snake like Florentino Perez in charge of it. And Misha, any last words from yourself on the Super League debacle?
I wanted to ask a question, you guys, because the Super League was destroyed by the wave of the English fans who protested, who went to the streets, who gathered around the stadiums, and they said their no. Do you expect that some CEO is gonna step down? That this wave, that this victory over the Super League is going to lead to some changes in the managing bodies of the English clubs? Do you think?
Personally, I mean, well, Ed Woodward has already stood down from Manchester United.
There's been a lot of pressure on Arsenal CEO at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's rumours that they will be forced to. I mean, Abramovich and Sheikh Mansour are their own separate entities because their clubs are their own little fiefdom. But there's rumours that obviously because Manchester United are shared on the stock market, that the Glazers are willing to sell and are looking for offers now to get out of Manchester United. I think the position for a lot of these CEOs in these clubs is now personally untenable. They cannot continue in those roles as far as I'm concerned. The problem is I'm not quite sure they either see that or will accept that themselves. I think from my perspective that this Premier League, as a more wider point on the Premier League, I think it's a bubble that is inevitably going to crash at some point. And unfortunately, those clubs who will be hit hardest will be the ones that, like myself and Richard, support, who are not in the Premier League. The turnover of wages, the percentage of wages according to turnover in the Championship is disgraceful. Reading released their accounts last week, and it's 217%. You've got clubs below that in League One. Sunderland are luckily quite financially solvent with a new rich owner. Wigan, of course, have now just been taken over, luckily. But Wigan themselves were on the brink of liquidation for a best part of a year to 18 months. There are clubs in England now, like Gillingham, Wimbledon, who have to play their matches at lunchtime in the United Kingdom, be it at 12 o'clock midday BST, because they can't play them any later because they can't afford to turn the floodlights on at night. They have that little amount of cash in their coffers and that high a cash flow problem. I think there will be a bubble break at some point in the Premier League. I thought this might have been it if these clubs got kicked out or whatever. I just think those at the top won't suffer from it. If there will be something as a longer term consequence of this, hopefully it is Woodward and Kroenke and John Henry and all them taken away from the game because their fans despise them. The people that they are there serving hate them. Football owners may own football clubs in name, but they will never own the soul of a football club. They are nothing but custodians. They are only there to take after the club and look after the club for the fans. I mentioned Fadoon earlier. He is the man in charge of all things Spartak. He sees it as his own personal entity. Technically, yes, he's not wrong. Possession is 9/10 of the law and so on. He owns Spartak, but he will only forever be the custodian of Spartak. As with Yevgeny Muller and Gazprom, these clubs are the fans. The clubs will be around longer than the individual. And I hope that some of these men in these positions, like Perez in Spain, Laporte, Kroenke, Wood has obviously already went. He was the most under fire of the lot. It must go. They cannot last any longer. Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I saw yesterday that, there was actually a protest at Manchester United's training ground in Carrington. Now, there's been discontent with the Glazers before, but I have literally how long has it been now? 16 years since the Glazers took over Manchester United. That is the highest level of protest I've seen, to actually go in. There's been protests outside of Old Trafford before, but never in the training ground. They got into the training ground and, Solskjaer and the players peacefully remonstrated with them, and then the police came and they told them to leave, and they did politely go. But that just shows you the level of, the fans. Yes, they shouldn't have invaded the training ground. Obviously, they broke a rule doing that, but they did nothing wrong. When they were there, and when they were told to back down, they did. But at least it showed that the fans now are willing. This has really touched a nerve with people. And just before we came on here tonight, the podcast, Arsenal playing Everton in the Premier League, and outside of the Emirates, there was big anti-Stan Kroenke protests. So I definitely think this has touched a nerve now, and it is interesting now as well how talk of the 50+1 rule that is in place in German football is now being talked about in England. You have the British Sports Minister Oliver Dowden now has promised a fan review, and that obviously shows that the government is getting involved now with it in terms of appointing an independent regulator. So I think this has touched a nerve now, I think, in England, and it will be very interesting to see what happens going forward. And I think the other 17 clubs in Italy and Spain as well will be very disappointed with the positions that Perez and Agnelli have taken in this. And I certainly, the other clubs in Spain, like Eibar, for example, Sevilla have managed to, maintain a very low level of debt and sell to buy, build themselves up that way. Eibar have no debts whatsoever, and still no debt apparently, despite refurbishing their stadium for when they got promoted to the Spanish top flight. Sassuolo are a very well-run club in Italy. These guys will be looking at people like Perez and Agnelli and their actions and thinking, sorry guys, these actions are just absolutely despicable. What about us? We're building a club. You guys have, spent money poorly on players, and now, you're complaining about having a Super League. It's, but I do definitely think in England, yes, that the protests certainly have touched a nerve recently. And like I say, that protest at the Man United training ground, that is definitely the strongest indication yet of protest against the Glazers. And this one tonight at the Emirates, I was looking at the pictures before our podcast, and it was a lot of people were there at the Emirates tonight. So I think this has certainly touched the nerve, and it's going to be a fascinating next year or so in terms of what happens from the fallout of this European Super League debacle.
Yeah, I think the 50+1 rule is an interesting development, especially in England. We've never seen much like that in these on these shows, and especially not at the highest level. It's often at a lower level when fans come in to save a club. Portsmouth did it. AFC Wimbledon famously broke apart and started again when MK Dons were moved. Old Wimbledon were moved to Milton Keynes and became MK Dons. But at the highest level, at the elite level, that's very, very rarely been seen. I don't think ever, if I remember correctly. And the 50+1 rule in Germany has its drawbacks. It's easy to circumvent with the shares of companies and giving those shares to company holders. I think Bayer, the owners of Bayer Leverkusen, their company men hold most of the shares, and it's a little bit of a weird dodge around the subject. Hoffenheim, there's question marks over how they fulfill the 50+1. Obviously, the big one is RB Rasenballsport Leipzig, RB Leipzig, formerly SV Markranstadt, who were bought out by Red Bull, completely disenfranchised, changed, moved, history rewritten, and they got to the Bundesliga on the back of a phony fulfillment of the 50+1. I think it's a ridiculous number. I can't remember the top of my head, but I believe it's either in single or double figures, the number of overall shareholders of RB Leipzig. And yes, it is 50+1, but that 50+1 is actually high-level employees within Red Bull, which it's a pretty disgraceful way of circumventing the rule. And that's where it's not perfect. There are worries in Germany that the 50+1 rule holds back their game at the elite level, especially compared to the amounts of money that's pushed around in Europe, particularly in England, ironically. But I do think that the 50+1 rule is something that would work in England because of the mass interest by the fans of being involved at that level. There's more fan interaction in England than anywhere else in the world right now. I believe it was a Reuters article last year that investigated it, and that means supporters' trusts, supporters' liaison and with their owners. Just my own club, we have a trust who is membership based. Anyone can buy into it and support it. Who have 6 to 7 meetings with the ownership a year, who have access to the ground whenever they want, whenever they request it, because our owners and our new owners in particular really do understand that we are the owners of the football club in anything but actual name. They are the custodians. And that is something that a lot of owners would be amenable to. I'm not quite sure, however, if it would work in Russia, purely because, not to say that the passion isn't there, I think the passion is there from the core fans. I worry about the financial stability of being able to do so at 50+1. There is, especially at the lower clubs, those who are regionally involved. A lot of clubs, say Tambov, for example. I mean, look at Florentino Perez crying in the river about Real Madrid's financial problems. Somebody take him to Tambov and show him what theirs are like. They were 100% regionally owned. Now they are a mixture of slight regional with a new private investment that came in this season. As soon as fans are involved, and they would say, for example, create that 50+1 with Tambov, then that regional investment, once gone, they're desperate to get rid. Most regional governments are absolutely desperate. The Primorsky Cry down in Amkar PM were desperate to get rid of Amkar at one point. They've restarted them again now, and thankfully Amkar aren't dead anymore. But as soon as they could, they just shot them off. It wouldn't be a 50+1 of fans and a 49 of regional government. They would be desperate for the fans to get that other 49, and I worry about that financial stability. What do you think, Misha, is a very final point on the Super League? Do you think that a 50+1 rule could work in Russian football?
Well, if we had enough private companies to sponsor football, I think it might. But truth be told, I don't believe it. I don't believe it in Russia nowadays, because it's not just the financial regulation. It's the whole economy, the whole system of the country working all together. And in the circumstances that we have in Russia right now, I don't believe it, because it's not a business here yet. I hope it's going to become one, but not in the perspective of the maybe 5 or 10 years upcoming. So I'm a little bit pessimistic about it.
I think Russia right now, in terms of structural issues, have got far bigger issues on their hand. If you took the old Soviet system and renamed it, it's largely the same, but the sporting societies system has, for a lot of the clubs, especially for a lot of the small regional governments, still exists in exactly the same way. The regional government who own SKA are the former employees of the former Army Sporting Society, the sister club of the old CSKA Moscow back in the day. Because of that, because of this Soviet hangover that exists behind the scenes, and it's getting better every year. It is getting better. There's more private and financial investment. The academy structure is blossoming more and more each year, especially from the private Togliatti Academy down in the south in Samara, just outside Samara. Sorry, the Krasnodar Academy, the blossoming Chatanova, it is getting better, but I believe that there's too many echoes of the old Soviet system that still exists behind the scenes in Russia for them to be able to create the 50+1 right now. They need to sort out their own structural issues, chiefly academies, privatization, and more so than anything, sponsorship money, and really putting these clubs in a solid financial setting to be able to compete. I discussed the Russian league with some English friends recently who, without patronizing them, don't have a clue about football in Russia. And they couldn't quite believe just how many professional football clubs in this country go out of business every year. They found it unbelievable that the sheer amount of clubs that just cease to exist because of the financial instability. And unfortunately, with that, we'll reach the end of this week's pod because we have run quite a bit over. Now, luckily, the European Super League lasted even less time than the average time a sporting director does under Leonid Fedun at Spartak, and it is hopefully dead in the water, or at least on ice for now. But as always, the RPL does continue as normal. There's a Moscow derby on Sunday as Spartak hosts CSKA. But in my mind, the two biggest games are arguably at the bottom of the table. There's Ufa hosts Sochi and Arsenal travels to Rostov, as the pair look to continue their good form of late and pull themselves away from the automatic relegation places. There's a little bit of slightly breaking news. As of recording, just earlier today, it was announced that St. Petersburg has been granted an extra 3 UEFA Euro 2020 matches. They will now host 7 games in the city, which includes Belgium, Russia, Poland, Slovakia, Finland, Russia, Sweden, Slovakia, Finland, Belgium, Sweden, Poland, and a quarter-final match. Now, they were given 3 extra games because Dublin is unable to fulfill the duties as a host city anymore due to the COVID outbreak and certain lockdown rules that are still in place. Richard, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure as always, James.
And Misha, thank you very much. Where can all the listeners find yourself on social media and listen to your podcasts online?
I have an Instagram account and a Twitter account. My podcast is in Russian. It's called the Sounds of Football. I don't think that's a huge part of our audience is going to listen to it. But well, if you want to expand your knowledge in Russian, you're welcome.
Yeah, and if any of those who are listening from Russia, and you probably already know anyway, but anyone who speaks fluent Russian, I'll link it all down below.
Okay.
We'll be back at the usual time next week. Until then, this has been the RFN podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.